We're looking at the crackdown that happened over the weekend where the Minister of State for Labor, had to seal off a particular company in Ogun State called Metal Manufacturing Nigeria Limited. And what happened was because petitions have been written against this company over the years, and what bothers me is the fact that the level of, the level of unprofessionalism when it comes to adherence to safety rules and regulations. You would expect that for a kind of company like that, proper attention will be given to the safety of the workers, the laborers who are working in the factory. But it took the intervention of the minister, the Minister of Labor, Minister of State for Labor, to curb this thing. So she had to visit the factory. And according to her, let me quote what she said. She said, the company was exposing its workers to various hazards, such as chemical substances, noise, dust due to lack of necessary safety equipment. This happens not just in companies like this, but you see across Nigeria. Because I remember 10 years ago, there was a particular report that came out about some Chinese companies and Lebanese companies doing something similar to this. So I'm wondering if that happened 10 years ago and now 10 years after, you still see something like this. Only God knows what will happen in some other manufacturing companies that have not been visited. What do you make out of this? First, the issue of safety and the adherence to the rules guiding the operations of such a factory, and for them to have to have gone against the safety rules. That this is a universal thing. It's quite important. The welfare or the safety of the workers should be the priority of the owners of this company. But this has been jeopardized, according to this report. What's your reaction?
Well, we cannot but appreciate her for that kind intervention. And what is really said to me is the value which we as a people put on the human life. And in this part of the world, especially in our country, we don't value life. We have no single value for human life. And this is why people can operate businesses without adherence to safety rules and regulations. And it's not just about this factory, so to speak. And there are thousands and thousands of them. Some time ago, somebody asked and said, look, take for example, even the crude exploration in Nigeria. And you see how those even international companies are flaring gases and making the environment not livable for inhabitants, especially in the Niger Delta. And of course, people just pay blind eye to these issues, and that's what worries me. You see, it's not about a company. It's also about our own people who sees danger, and they necessarily will not want to pay attention to these happenings. And this, for me, is what the issues are. You have companies not doing what is right, and somebody writes a petition to the appropriate authority to look at these issues. And what one expects is that you take actions, but you cannot take away or rule away these pecuniary rent-seeking behaviors of those who work in the authorities to really make sure that we are not endangering the life of the people. So for me, it's even more than the company itself. It's the people who are supposed to enforce safety rules and regulations that ensure that companies that are setting up are ensuring that the people who work in those companies are protected or they have life. But unfortunately, we don't do. And you will be even shocked that these people who are working in this hazardous environment, there may not even be any insurance for them to keep them, and then if they have diseases that are acquired from this environment, they'll be able to survive themselves. And then, of course, this won't, because, of course, you have a pool of people who are looking for employment. So even if 1,000 die, then you employ another 1,000. So this is quite unhealthy for us as a nation. And I think this speaks to regulatory bodies in Nigeria, in the states, to look at the condition under which people work and ensure that we are doing at least the minimum to guarantee the safety of life. And this is critical.
Isn't that supposed to be part of the responsibility of the Nigeria Labour Congress? It's not just about talking about minimum wage. One will have expected even the Ogun State chapter of NLC could have visited, or because I learned over the years, petitions have been written to the appropriate quarters, to several ministries, and nothing has been done. That's to give you the impression how powerful, how connected those people are. So why do you think over the years nothing has been done, and it took the intervention of the minister all the way to travel from Abuja to come and visit that factory before this is being addressed? What does that suggest about some of these agencies and what they need to do as regards the issue of supervision?
Well, of course, labor in Nigeria has been grossly politicized, and so they are so much concerned about, also because they themselves are even rent-seeking in the first place. So when you have almost everybody seeking rent, somehow, you see, this is the kind of thing you get. So even when they see things that are adverse to the people, nobody want to put eye on it. Of course, you will have plenty of people. Those companies can be picketed by labor and say, look, if you don't change this thing, work won't go on here. But what do you see? Agencies of government that are supposed to enforce this rule, at least this petition were written to somebody. Now, what happened to the people who got this petition and they didn't act? So these are, for me, the very critical issue. And I think it's boiled down to what I said earlier on the value that we place on human life. For us as a people, money is the most important. And that's why I keep emphasizing here, no society will develop or grow without putting adequate value on human life. If you look at it from the religious perspective, the value of a soul from God's point of view is the whole world. And that's why I said, what can you give in exchange of a single soul? There is nothing that is as valuable, not 10 million, not 100 million, to see a life die. And so this is the problem, and this is why you see development is even slowing here, because emphasis is not placed on the human person. It's always about what we get, how much we get. And so these are the conversations, these are the narrative out there. And so once people are putting emphasis on these issues, you will find that we will not be able to prioritize the human person.
Let's go back to our earlier story, talking about the crackdown that happened, on this same company, talking about Metal Manufacturing Limited. What do you think should be the narrative for owners of company to prioritize, or should be done for owners of company to prioritize the welfare of their workers? Because this, for every in every human endeavor, it is also important to prioritize the welfare of people, because they are the human assets to the company. Apart from other assets that you have, the human elements are the most important, and it's quite important for the owners of company to prioritize their welfare. What should be the narrative or can be done to ensure that this kind of enlightenment is done and people can take action when it is necessary? Then what do you make of the plight of the workers? It seems to me that they are helpless. Some of them will feel that, okay, I need to earn my salary, so let me just abide by the rules. Or, some people just feel, okay, because I'm helpless, let me endure and just get my daily living.
Well, I feel it's much more than the company themselves, apart from the fact that we're expecting that they have to develop some sets of values which we prioritize the human person. You also will agree with me that the real issue here lies with the regulators. Elsewhere, when people are setting up factories, the regulatory authorities give them checklists of things that need to be in place for them to be able to run. So in which case, the country sets standard for practice. And then from time to time, these agencies are looking at inspecting that these standards are actually still being maintained. That's the role of government in society. Every businessman wants to make profit. So they want to do shortcuts. And if there's something that you can avoid that will cost you additional capital, if you want to avoid it, you can avoid it.
To the expense of human.
Oh, yes, because business thrives on profits. So it is the society that regulates these practices to ensure that people are not making profit at the expense of the society at large. This is issues. And we must realize that why are nations interested in the welfare and well-being of its people is to be able to keep stability in society. Because what you have is that if you have such companies in their 100 operating, you create a health conditions that put pressure on the health facility in the country. If these people are insured, it put pressure on the insurance company, and the entire economy is affected. But unfortunately, some people don't really look at these other ripple effects of the things that they look at. All they are just looking at is that, of course, you can look at, you give somebody 20,000, give somebody 100,000, and then you turn a blind eye and allow these things to be. This is for where really, if we must make progress as a country, those who are employed to regulate operations of corporations, industries, factories, must do their due diligence. Because human beings, all they need is survivor. They need survivor. They have to survive because we are not all equally endowed. And if somebody is chasing survivor, he can work under any circumstances. Because that's the best option he can get at that moment. So I think regulation is important and it should be enforced. And all regulatory agencies must do this. It's not just even about factories alone. Even look at it, for example, water people drink, produced in unhealthy situations. Some people even go ahead to put things on their labels, ingredients that are never even present. So these are the issues by enforcement agencies. And if you don't use scapegoats, these practices will continue. But I think this may be a good scapegoat, that people understand that there are consequences for every bad behavior.
Yes, indeed, the minister, said something related to that, that she's going to make example of this, and that will deter other companies, who flout the rules when it comes to safety. And for me, it's also important for workers, individuals, to also take responsibility. There are provisions under the law whereby you have rights as a worker. For you, when it comes to welfare or your safety, it's part of your rights. And I think with the collaboration with the Nigerian Labour Congress, they can take action, to ensure that the owners of those companies comply to the expected standard as safety. Let's hope that the minister will live up to her words and then will make things better. All right, let's move on to the oil sector, where we have the chairman of Watersmith Group, Abdulrazak Issa, has announced his company is working diligently to launch the phase 2 of its refinery project, which will double the capacity from 5,000 barrels per day to 10,000 barrels per day. Presently, the capacity of the refinery, it's about 5,000 barrels per day. It's in Imo State, one of these modular refineries. We had a conversation a few days ago where we don't expect government to fix everything. In Nigeria is a place where people expect government to do everything. But this is a private organization who has taken a space in the oil sector to see how they can solve the problem, to also contribute its quota to the local production of oil. You agree with me that that's what we need to do as a nation. Dangote is coming up with his own plan, and we're in December now. hopefully to start producing 350,000 barrels per day. But if others could also duplicate that at different levels, it will also add to the numbers. What do you think will be the impact of this kind of project? You know, the man intends to increase it from 5,000 barrels per day to 10,000 barrels per day. That's the phase 2 of the project.
It's welcomed. Like we've said, we're having a regime that is prioritizing competition. And for me, what will make for a good life is the ability to facilitate businesses to operate. And when we have this kind of healthy competition in the economy, the potency of driving down cost and price is also very high. And I think that's where we should all be hopeful as a country, that you are having people willing to invest in the economy. And this is quite, for me, healthy. And I think a lot of business people are looking at and seeing that there are opportunities that we would need to explore. And as we continue to exploit these potentials and these opportunities, we must, as a matter of necessity, try hard to see that government do not frustrate these investments, especially at the local and subnational level. Because one of the things that will kill a business is the fact that people are putting in money, and then of course the local government and the rest of it are not allowing these people to even make profit before imposing all manners of taxation that of course we grind operation and regulations and levies on these companies. And I think if we allow businesses to thrive this way, it will be good for all of us. The issues of unemployment that we are talking about, of course, is being gradually addressed. These are the core for me. And the like of Dangote must also be very conscious. Yes, of course, they've done heavy investment, because what people had expected that since July, that they said they were going to start operation, up to now they have not started. When this modular refinery working all across the country, then they understand that competition is going to be very strict. Because IMO will be serving IMO. Of course, the cost of logistics will reduce cost at that level. And you see Benin serving some other part of the Niger Delta, and you see Kaduna serving Kaduna.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, what we're going to see is that
it's decentralized.
Oh yes, decentralized, and there'll be value for money at the end of the day. And I think for me, it's a healthy thing to do. And it also shows that there's a whole lot of liberalization that is going on in that sector. And the government is living up to its billing, that they're going to free up that space so that there'll be healthy competition, and then society can benefit at the end of the day.
Let's look at the state of our refineries, the one in Port Harcourt, Warri, and the rest. The minister has promised that he's going to do everything to ensure that the refineries are working up to full capacity. And the plan is to ensure that by 2024, the 4 refineries are back, and so that it could help local production of crude oil. We won't have a situation where virtually we're relying on import and all that, because you agree with me that petrol is very crucial when it comes to our daily activities, when it comes to the formal and informal sector, everybody. It's very critical for business owners, for individuals. Let me ask your opinion on what you think about the refineries. There are some who argue that, hey, this refineries has to be sold off, because over the years you've invested money in maintenance, in repairs, yet it hasn't been productive as it ought to be. But there are some who argue that, okay, these are like national assets that should be protected. And in the interest of some workers who work in that place, something should be done to ensure that they revive these refineries for these people not to be jobless. And you have Labour also coming up with another argument that if anything has to be done about the refineries, they will have to be carried along, because the welfare of those workers are also priority to them. What's your take on the issue of the local refineries we have here, the 4 of them?
Well, I think the issues that we have had with our refineries are not capacity-related issues. The big issues actually be sabotage by both those who work there and other people who are also trading in that industry. So for me, sabotage is what it is. It's not that our refineries cannot work. It's not that our refinery cannot be profitable. We've said this over and over. If Saudi Aramco can be making so much money refining petrol, why should we not make money? Except that some people deliberately sabotage the effort to make money. You see, all these issues that we're talking about, they're all related. And they are all value-related issues. The biggest elephant in our room has always been that corruption. That if you take corruption away from all the things we do, we can become better people. The potentials are there for them to really make profit. So it's not as if government cannot run businesses. I've said it here over and over. A friend of mine was telling me the other day, and he said, look, he's envious of Nigeria. And I said, why are you envious of us? He said, there is no big corporation that you will visit in the world where you will not see in Nigeria at decision-making level. And he said, your country has not been able to get to that standard. To say that you get to every big corporations in the world and you are seeing your countryman at the decision-making point. So if we can run businesses for other nations, who says we cannot run for ourselves? Except that here, we are too weak in terms of enforcing regulations and ensuring that people do what is required. This, for me, is the real issue. And once we can take this out of the game, and of course, like I said, everything stop at the table of the leader. And if we start to hold people accountable and responsible for their actions, a lot of all these things will change. And it starts by us having to look at issues. You saw one news recently making the round, and somebody said a particular agency in this country, all the revenue they made, they have overspent it, and yet government pays all the overhead. Now you wonder and ask yourself, so where were they spending all this money? This is the issues that we face, and this is what is affecting all this sector. This is why poverty is ever growing in our environment. So if people become responsible and people are beginning to understand the how do they put it now, element of greed really destroys society, maybe we will be able to fix a lot of our problems.